House Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries is now cursing out Donald Trump over that racist video posted to his Truth Social account. Now, we debated whether or not to show you this disturbing content, but we believe it's important for you to see it. This is a screenshot of that video depicting former President Barack Obama and former First Lady Michelle Obama as apes. The post was up for hours on the president's social media feed before it was taken down. Here's leader Hakeem Jeffries just a short time ago.
This disgusting video posted by the so-called president was done intentionally. Donald Trump and his vile, racist, and malignant behavior. This guy is an unhinged bottom feeder. President Obama and Michelle Obama are brilliant, caring, and patriotic Americans. They represent the best of this country.
Jeffries bleeped himself in that video, and a spokesperson for the Obamas says they're not commenting, quote, for now. The post drew a rare rebuke from members of the president's own party. Tim Scott, the only black Republican in the U.S. Senate, called it, quote, the most racist thing I've seen out of this White House. Now, as for Trump and his allies, well, they're making excuses. Pastor Mark Burns says he spoke to the president today and that Trump, quote, assured me clearly and unequivocally that he did not post it. The White House, after initially defending the video, now claims a staffer erroneously made the post. We have no evidence the staffer posted the video, and if the staffer did, the White House hasn't said who it is or whether they're going to face any consequences. Regardless, we have heard nothing directly from the president on the post, almost an entire day after it went up. And let's be clear, Trump loves a distraction, even if it's this vile, especially as he desperately urges the American people to, quote, move on from the Epstein files. But that is not going to happen. Because also breaking tonight, members of Congress will be able to review, starting this Monday, unredacted versions of the 3 million pages of Epstein documents released by the DOJ. Joining us now to discuss all of this, MS Now political contributor Jason Johnson. He's a politics and journalism professor at Morgan State University. Also with us, MS Now political analyst and New York Times opinion columnist Michelle Goldberg.
So I feel like a broken record because I said this earlier on the network, but I will say it again today. The first statement that the White House put out today, this morning, about this video was from the White House press secretary, where she said this was fake outrage, faux outrage, and that all the president did was repost a video, a meme video that depicted him as the king of the jungle and some Democrats as characters from The Lion King. There is not one ape in The Lion King. Not one ape. There's a baboon, Rafiki, but there are no apes in The Lion King. So the reality of the situation is that the trope of depicting black people as animals, close to apes, actually did not start as an insult nor as a joke. It started as justification for the rape and pillage and enslavement of African people on the continent. You can literally, the continent of Africa, you can literally look it up. And it was what the white Europeans perfected that the Americans used to justify chattel slavery. Take that all the way up to the civil rights movement. Again, the trope reappeared to justify why black people in this country shouldn't vote. And there's a direct line from what the white Europeans cooked up in the 1700s to this particular White House that now seems to deem anyone who is not a straight white man a DEI hire and not there because of merit. So know your history. Yes, this is in fact a distraction. That don't mean we're not going to address it, though, because it is Black History Month. Only 6 days in, damn it. Y'all need to pull it together.
Well, not too much more to say after that, because it is a perfect summation, Professor, of where the country finds itself right now. My take on this today was really a hard one, because this is what Donald Trump thinks of black people.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. I appreciate the history lesson. I appreciate the connection because it's very important. But at the end of the day, this is what this man, as president of the United States, thinks of black people, irrespective of their title, position, their accomplishments, their successes, their failures, who they are, who they aren't. You are black, and that's enough for me. His history, his first public discourse on the subject of race occurred in 1973-74 when he was sued by the Department of Justice for discriminating. Why? Because he didn't want black people to live in the apartments that his name was on. So this, for me, is just a continuation of the Donald Trump story that many of us have been trying to get both black and whites inside the party to understand and stop shilling for this person the way you have. Because guess what? You own this thing now, too. You own this. So it's great people coming out today, Professor, and saying, this is the most racist. Oh, my God. Where were you when there were shithole countries? Where were you when there was talking about black people and black women in particular, calling them piggies, calling them names? Where were you then?
I don't believe this is the most racist thing Tim Scott's heard in the White House. Okay.
Thank you.
I mean, that's just the first thing. I don't believe that. I don't believe that's the worst thing. I have been to South Carolina. I know some of the things that are said in this White House. I don't think it's the most racist thing Donald Trump has ever said. We still don't know what might be on the cutting room floor from The Apprentice, but I have heard stories because I've talked to people who actually worked on The Apprentice. So none of this ever shocks me. It also, because it's Black History Month and because of the Epstein files and because of the economy, I don't allow him to elicit my outrage.
There you go.
Because I'm infinitely more disgusted that this man is bankrupting people. I am infinitely more disgusted that this man is taking away health care. I am infinitely more disgusted that this guy does not care about the fact that he socialized with alleged child rapists and molesters for years and years and years. This is just part and parcel of what Donald Trump has always been. And I'm also never impressed by Republicans who now, when the heat is finally hitting them about ICE, about the economy, about everything else, now they can suddenly say, well, I guess we can sort of admit he's racist. He's always been racist. That's not new.
It's not new.
And I can pat my head and rub my tummy, and I don't have to be able to look at his racism and have that distract from the other ways that he is destroying this country.
Well, it's not new, and it's not just in the language or in the rhetoric. It's also steeped so deeply into the policies of this administration. I mean, I think back to the way Donald Trump originally came to power with birtherism, which, yes, is fundamentally racist, but is also this questioning about who is deserving of being American, who is considered legitimate in their American identity and in their power as American. And there is an absolute through line there to his attacks on voting, to his attacks on the 14th Amendment, to what we are watching play out in Minneapolis and all across this country as his deportation force goes into American cities and is in many cases taking American citizens and detaining them because the Supreme Court of the United States has condoned racial profiling. So, Michelle, draw for me a line from what we are hearing from this White House and what they're actually doing.
Well, and I think, to bring it back to Minneapolis, I mean, the reason that they went in there in the first place was not because there was some sort of crisis of undocumented immigrants. There are fewer undocumented people in Minnesota than in the average state in this country. They went in there because of this demonization campaign against Somalis in particular, right? And then that's also why they went into Lewiston, Maine. Lewiston, Maine, for a long time was held up as this immigration success story, a town that had been revitalized by immigration after kind of being hard on its luck after the mills closed. Again, they go specifically into Lewiston, Maine. Then there was news earlier this week. I was in Springfield, Ohio, because there was plans to go into Springfield, Ohio, a town that's been revitalized by Haitian immigrants and that's been targeted over and over by this administration. They've tried to take away TPS status for Haitians, who are here legally because they have temporary protected status. Everybody knows that Haiti is not a safe place for people to return to, and nevertheless, they've tried to claim in court that it is, that somehow the crisis there is over. So the way that they're doing mass deportation is by ethnic group, which is, there's a name for that, right? And so I just think the reason that Donald Trump is president is because he channeled white rage towards Barack Obama with his birtherism conspiracy. And it's been, not just racism, Donald Trump has also channels a lot of misogyny, but racism has been absolutely a through line in his two presidencies now. And the reason that this moment I think is interesting is that there's so much denial among Republicans who will insist that kind of Donald Trump isn't what we can all see that he is. And then every so often something happens where that denial becomes unsustainable. And they all, it happened kind of after January 6th. It's happened at a couple other moments. It never lasts. But there's always this moment where you can see him clearly, and even they have to somehow respond to, the obscenity of having this man in the White House.
Yeah, I mean, we want to chime in, Jason?
I also want to add that, let's be clear about everybody who's responsible for this, right? It's not just that you have white Americans who are racist, whatever, but Republicans, they can't sell their racism without the active participation of black and brown people. Yeah. OK, we can look at Candace Owens. OK, we can look at some of the things that Byron Donald has excused. We can look at some of the things Tim Scott has excused. Nick Fuentes, Enrique Tarrio, the head of the Proud Boys. They can't even sell racism without black and brown people helping them. And that's part of the problem. So, again, I think it's important for us to highlight what Donald Trump has always been. But we have to make sure that we look at racism and systematic racism and white supremacy and all these sorts of things as a group project. And it gets really lazy if we just say it's Trump and his administration. Right. There are lots of people participating in this kind of problem. And that's what I think America needs to understand. Because as long as we just think it's him being a bad outlier and it's his party sort of protecting him, we forget about the fact that this is a pervasive problem, whether you're looking at ICE, whether you're looking at policing, whether you're looking at the Department of Justice or anything else like that. It is a larger issue than just one bad president. He is a symptom, not necessarily the cause of these problems.
Well, the problem is in America, we have never truly reckoned with how this country came to be in the first place. And so when we discuss white supremacy, we don't talk about it as an ideology, but that is in fact what it is. And because it's an ideology, black people can be white supremacists. Come on now. Just like women can be sexist. Right? Because there's a belief in the patriarchy. There's an ideology. There's an infrastructure there. But I don't want to get too analytical tonight. I will just say that
you pride yourself on being analytical, and we live for it, Simone Sanders Townsend. On tonight of all nights, I want to hear that analysis. And I just want to tell you, I'm not sure where this happened. One of our producers jumped in my ear. The president of the United States was just asked about this by several reporters at the White House, and he dodged all of those questions, Simone.
I mean, because there's no good, because the actual answer is, you didn't think it was funny? Of course, This is what I think. Let's move on. Why is this a big deal for you? That's the actual answer, because that's the truth of who he is. But it's just a little too untoward, given the outrage from every corner of the political spectrum today, for him to say that. But there's one thing about this president. He has been wildly consistent in who he is. And so maybe I think the issue that Jason Johnson and the chairman are raising here is that there are a number of people that have yet to reckon that not only did they excuse the president's racism and sexism, right, and his love of white supremacist ideology, because that is in fact what the Great Replacement theory is rooted in. Okay, this idea that now the Republicans are saying Democrats are shipping in, they're letting in all of these brown people to vote for them, and they're trying to replace us. So we have to send them back to where they're from. That's what Stephen Miller's saying. That is white supremacist ideology. But if we call it that and we say that, then there's a lot of people that think that they're good and moderate and the good guys, okay, and that are just waiting until Donald Trump is out of here, and then we're going to go back to how it was. There are a lot of people that then need to reckon with they themselves, okay? So I don't know if the people are going to do their work. I will just say the Epstein files ain't going anywhere.
They're not. Yeah, the Epstein files aren't going anywhere, and we will continue to talk about them because the victims of the Epstein files deserve this moment more so than Donald Trump wants them to have it. Michelle, I don't want to mix apples and oranges here, but there are you really laid out the through line argument and narrative around how all this comes together. Let me ask you this, and I'm not trying to put a lot on you as a woman, as a white woman, nothing like that. I just, as an American, as you step back and look at this, how do you see America receiving this moment? How do you think this lands? We have outrage and notes from people who have profile and so forth, but someone at the kitchen table tonight, are they talking about this? Is this something? Because my suspicions is this may not land as deeply as we would like it to, and that there may be more people who take comfort and may even laugh at it and think it's a humorous way, and Black History Month was always a waste to begin with.
Well, I think that probably a lot of people who voted for Donald Trump feel that way. And you can see in a certain way this kind of post as fan service towards a certain part of his base. I mean, I do think it has clearly landed enough that the White House has felt like it had to respond, right? They felt like they had to back off. They felt like they had to blame it on some mysterious staffer who goes on kind of posting sprees from the president's account in the middle of the night, which if somebody's authorized to do that, we should probably know about it. But, look, this is a very, very unpopular president. I think that this has clearly broken through. It's why so many Republicans felt like they had to respond, like they had to denounce him, even if, now some of them are already walking back their denunciations or saying there's nothing to see here. But again, I think it was one of those moments, and there are these moments from time to time when the veil drops and the sort of lies that people have to tell themselves to justify this kind of kamikaze presidency become insupportable.
Yes. My final word on this, Alicia, is straightforward to the camera, to the American people. When we elect a representative, a president, they are an extension of who we are. Tonight I have to ask you, is this who we are? Because this is who our president is.
Dr. Jason Johnson, Michelle Goldberg, thank you both so much for getting us started. We are not done with this conversation. Later in the hour, we're going to get reaction to Trump's racist video from Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, discuss some breaking developments in the case of 5-year-old Liam Ramos, who just left that detention facility in her state. But up next, new details about an unusual letter Trump's Justice Department sent to secretaries of state all across the country. One of those secretaries, Maine's Shayna Bellows, will join us to tell us what she...
MS Now has confirmed that top election officials across multiple states have received a letter from a so-called FBI election executive inviting them to meet with members of federal agencies for an unusual briefing later this month to discuss, quote, preparations for the upcoming midterm elections. The same elections Trump has already tried to undermine and called to nationalize in violation of the U.S. Constitution. But of course, joining us now, Maine Secretary of State Shayna Bellows. She was invited to that meeting. She's also running for governor of Maine. Also joining us, Joyce Vance, MS Now legal analyst and a former U.S. attorney.
Madam Secretary, 2 questions for you. 1, have you ever received an invitation like this from the FBI? And 2, do you plan on attending this meeting?
No and yes. But here's the thing about the invitation. It wasn't even a formal letter. It was a Teams invite. And from someone that we heard from last week in the Secretary of State's conference talking about election security, it's not like we've never worked with the FBI before. When I was swatted, they stepped in. When we all got white powder mailings in 2024. But this is highly unusual. And we're a little bit concerned given the president's recent ridiculous rhetoric about nationalizing elections.
A Teams invite?
Teams invite.
Is crazy. Teams. I have many questions about the Teams invitation. Joyce, first of all, have you ever got a Teams invitation for a very sensitive conversation with secretaries of state about election security from the federal government? But secondly, what do you make of these attempts from the federal government, led by the White House and aided and abetted by the Department of Justice, to put pressure on these secretaries of state? This is not, they've had a lot of outreach from this Justice Department and the Department of Homeland Security.
Well, the Teams invite is a new one by me, too. But, as to this notion of DOJ meeting with secretaries of state, if we still lived in a normal world, this wouldn't be unusual. As a U.S. attorney, I would meet with my Secretary of State in advance of elections. But there's context for this, and Secretary of State Bellows is one of the state secretaries who has resisted turning over voter rolls that the federal government has asked them to turn over. We know that in Minneapolis, there was this, I think, very unfortunate admission that all of the ICE presence in Minneapolis could go away if only those voter rolls were turned over. And that suggests to us very strongly that this is a federal government that's not interested in protecting elections. It's interested in voter suppression. If this were a normal, autonomous Justice Department working in advance of an election, that would be one thing. But this is Donald Trump's law firm, which is now situated inside of the Kennedy building on Pennsylvania Avenue, working as the Justice Department, but for this president. That makes this entire proceeding very suspect.
You know, there's a lot about this that's suspect, and I think, Madam Secretary, some of this could be sort of assessing and sort of getting you guys comfortable and, you know, sort of all having kind of a buddy moment where you just kind of say, yeah, and by the way, you know, we're thinking about this in our state, and these are some of the protections we're looking to put in our state. So I'm highly suspect of whoever this FBI election executive is, which is a made-up title and position. But there is something I think that's very, very important to take away from it. And there are two aspects of it. One was noted by the Lieutenant Governor of Utah, Deidre Henderson, who said the things that have been said publicly, frankly, are quite appalling. That's problematic to publicly claim that secretaries of states are not doing our jobs and the federal government has to do it for us is not okay. Politico had this talking about the pretext of this that I referred to earlier. Everything we lived through in 2020 was the beginning, not the end of this multi-year effort to dismantle democracy in America, Michigan Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson said in her interview. We're seeing it play out now and reaching a fever pitch in really extraordinary, unprecedented, scary ways. So irrespective of this gathering on Teams with this federal election czar crazy person, you and I know that there are concerted efforts by secretaries of states in red states, as I just noted with Utah, and blue states that are concerned about what this administration plans to do this November. How are those efforts coming together? How is that communication infrastructure? Again, I would not invite this administration to be a part of that, but your call.
This won't be a buddy-buddy moment. You know, that ended about a year ago when they zeroed out election and cybersecurity funding to the states through the EIS Act. And then last summer when they tried to seize our voter rolls, and I said, go jump in the Gulf of Maine. And then they sued us and over 24 states that are standing up. And then most recently and most grotesquely, the invasion and the murder of 2 American citizens by ICE agents in Minnesota, and them saying, oh, we'll take ICE out of Minnesota if you give over those voter rolls. And coming into Maine with a grotesquely named Operation Catch of the Day, there's zero trust. And it's so strange because suddenly, you know, every year election officials, we prepare for the next election. We prepare against natural disasters, swatting, bomb threats against election officials. This year, we're preparing against potential federal interference. And that is chilling.
Let's stay on that point, Joyce, about how there is now zero trust. You're seeing that manifest in some of the rulings that we're getting from judges. I want to read you this one from a judge in Oregon who really condemned the Trump administration for their voter roll crusade. The presumption of regularity that has been previously extended to plaintiff, that it could be taken at its word with little doubt about its intentions and stated purposes, no longer holds. When plaintiff, in this case, conveys assurances that any private and sensitive data will remain private and used only for a declared and limited purpose, it must be thoroughly scrutinized and squared with its open and public statements to the contrary. They keep telling us what they want to do, and that means even judges are saying, we can't give you the benefit of the doubt. Where then does that leave our democracy?
It's not a good development. The presumption of regularity has always not protected the government, but recognized that the government was trustworthy, that when assistant United States attorneys went into court and made a representation to a judge about what they had done, that they could be believed. Now we're seeing judges across the country, this is not the first judge to do this, say that the government no longer is entitled to receive that benefit of the doubt. And that's a reflection on this administration, the way they've conducted themselves in court, and the many times, so many that I no longer have actually an accurate count on how many times it's happened, that the government has misrepresented, sometimes openly lied to judges in court and in pleadings.
Madam Secretary, in the minute we have left, can you, I don't want to have you give away the game plan, but can you share with us, if not just you and your state, but if states across the country, your counterparts in states across the country are prepared for what is very clearly coming down the pipeline, not just before Election Day, but in the days and weeks after.
We are. There will be safe and secure elections in 2026. I mean, Trump is terrified. They're going to lose huge. But we are going to have safe and secure elections because of people like my Democratic and Republican colleagues all across the country. We won't back down. We'll keep fighting, and we're going to win.
All right. Maine Secretary of State Shenna Bellows and Joyce Vance, thank you both very much. In just a moment, Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett will join the conversation. We will get her reaction to Donald Trump's racist post and House Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries' scathing response. It's only on The Weeknight. Back to the breaking news of the hour. Donald Trump posting online and then taking down that racist video that depicts former President Barack Obama and former First Lady Michelle Obama as apes. Here's more reaction from House Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries, who also said, quote, F Donald Trump.
It's time for John Thune, Mike Johnson, and Republicans to denounce this serial fraudster who's sitting at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue pretending to be the President of the United States.
Joining us now is Democratic Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett of Texas. She is also a candidate for the United States Senate.
Welcome, Congresswoman. It's good to have you. We were talking a little bit earlier in the hour about how all of this happened 6 days into Black History Month. And the complete and lack disregard for how this month resonates with Black and brown people in this country. What's your reaction to both what you heard from the president and from Leader Jeffries? Just because they both framed, I think, this moment very well, to be honest.
Yeah, it is so interesting because it's like we take one step forward and then we take 2 steps back. And that's exactly what we've gotten out of this administration. And so for everyone that wanted to say that Black people were overreacting or that we were being dramatic, I want to be clear that it's not just his words, it's in his policy that he is slinging this type of hate, whether we're talking about ICE and how he deals with everyone, because it's not limited to immigrants, or whether we're talking about the rolling back of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I do want to be clear. I don't give Donald Trump a lot of credit for much, but I will say this. He is the king of distractions and division. And right now, he has everyone talking about the fact that he posted something that was racist, which frankly, if you've been paying attention, it was right on par. You're not surprised whatsoever. Right. At the same time, this is the day after he said, stop talking about the Epstein files, as more and more is coming out, as we're being told as lawmakers that we're going to be given an opportunity to start to physically go and inspect the files. He is trying to distract, and frankly, he is doing a good job of it. We know who he is. We know who he was when he got elected the first time. We know who he was when he got elected this time. And so there's not really much to be surprised about when it comes to Donald Trump and not really having a level of respect specifically for people of color.
There's a level of respect. There's also the bravery to stand behind what he has said and done. Take a look at the President of the United States dodging questions on this very issue. Won't apologize. Just walk away. Just wave. I know it doesn't surprise you.
Fast. Oh my God.
Walk away.
He's moving fast, Congresswoman. And here's the thing that we're talking about. It's not just in the rhetoric. It's in the policy, as you said. I mean, I'm thinking about little Liam Ramos and his bunny hat and the fact that a nation has rallied around the image of this child as humanizing something that we often talk about simply in numbers. You have Trump's DHS pushing to expedite the removal of Liam and his family. What does that tell you about what their objective here and politically how they are reading this moment?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that we have to guess because they have been very overt with their words, not just Trump, but J.D. Vance. It has been kind of this we don't have to hide anymore. We are the ones that are being targeted, we being white people, right? There is a lack of respect for the contributions that all of us make to this country. Whether you are Black Americans who did not arrive because we wanted to be here, but because we were dragged over here and stolen from our homeland, or whether you are immigrants that are simply seeking refuge and a better life for yourself and seeking asylum, or whether it's just a matter of opportunities, because we used to have it where we felt like contributions from other people actually helped us. And frankly, the numbers bear out that they do. Whether we're talking about the contributions that are paid in taxes, whether we're talking about the contributions that overall just keep our economy going. Right now, we know that this economy is shrinking, and there's a lot of reasons that it's shrinking. But honestly, a big part of it has to do with the disastrous way that they are handling immigration. As it relates to little 5-year-old Liam, I'm sorry, but that's not who he espoused to be going after when he made his campaign promises. He said he was going to go after the bad guys. Now, those of us that know Trump well enough knew that he was lying. We knew that he would go after any and everyone. You tell me how showing up at an elementary school and grabbing the kids is going to make America great. Please explain that to me. And I want to be clear about something, because Liam has become a symbol. But just like we've seen other children be symbols, whether we're talking about integration of schools or otherwise, there are other children there. Yep. In visiting that facility, I want to be clear, there are hundreds of children, and the youngest was 1 month old. I don't know how you get to say you're so proud of the America that we are seeing on display right now. Real patriotism means to push back against this, because somehow we haven't found a jail cell for anybody in the Epstein files. But we've got children that are rotting away in something that looks like a prison to me.
This morning, inside a federal courtroom, a moment unfolded that pushed the American legal system to its edge. A former president of the United States stood just one sentence away from incarceration. Not figuratively, not hypothetically, literally one sentence. What transpired has since been described by legal experts as one of the most direct confrontations with judicial authority in modern American history. And it's critical you understand this. Every second of it was documented, recorded, and preserved in real time. A federal judge looked Donald Trump directly in the eye and issued a stark command: sit down or go to jail. And Trump did not sit down. What followed was a 2-minute standoff that forced courtroom security to step forward, attorneys to physically intervene, and the entire legal system to pause in collective tension. I've spent the last several hours reviewing court transcripts, legal commentary, and firsthand accounts from inside that room. And I'm going to walk you through exactly what happened, because in this case, the details matter far more than the headlines. Before we step inside that courtroom, you need to understand the atmosphere that led up to this moment. For weeks, seasoned legal observers had been noticing warning signs, not in official filings, not in formal motions, but in patterns, subtle shifts that experienced court watchers know how to recognize. Trump has always been combative in court. That part isn't new. But his defiance has historically followed a familiar rhythm, almost a rehearsed routine. Arrive late to attract media attention, mutter comments just loud enough to be overheard, post inflammatory statements during lunch breaks, exit with defiant sound bites for the cameras waiting outside. That's the pattern. That's what everyone expected. But yesterday, that pattern collapsed. Analysts who closely monitor Trump's courtroom behavior flagged multiple red alerts, angry Truth Social posts late into the night, a last-minute reshuffling of his legal team, extra security arriving earlier than scheduled, and perhaps most telling of all, complete silence from his attorneys. There's something you learn when covering cases like this. Whenever Donald Trump goes quiet before a court appearance, something is about to detonate. Early this morning, courthouse security reported what they described as unusual tension in the defense staging area. Emergency strategy meetings that hadn't been held in weeks. The kind of frantic, last-minute huddles Trump's team only calls when they're bracing for something volatile. A damaging witness, a surprise ruling, or a client about to abandon the script entirely. No one knew which scenario was unfolding. Some suspected all three were colliding at once. But observers were certain of one thing: Trump's posture had changed. And when a criminal defendant shifts, demeanor without warning. Even subtly experienced judges take notice. Judge anger unnoticed. Now let me take you inside the courtroom. Trump is seated at the defense table in his trademark Navy suit. The prosecution is questioning a key financial witness. Standard procedure, routine testimony, and then it happened. Trump didn't lean over to whisper to his attorney. He didn't slide a note across the table. He spoke out loud, sharp, deliberate, and directed straight at the witness stand. That's a complete lie, Trump said. A total fabrication. Everyone in this room knows it. The courtroom froze. Picture the scene. Every attorney stopped taking notes. Every spectator froze in place. Every camera operator in the overflow room leaned closer to their monitors. Judge Engoron slowly removed his reading glasses. He lifted his gaze, and the warning he delivered in that moment was anything but routine. It wasn't procedural, it wasn't polite, and it certainly wasn't negotiable. Legal. Analysts who later examined the transcript described the judge's response as immediate, unmistakable, and most critically fully backed by federal contempt authority. Mr. Trump, Judge Engoron said, his voice slicing through the silence, you will not speak unless you are addressed. You will not interrupt these proceedings. Do you understand? And this is where the situation veered into territory no one anticipated. Trump did not retreat. Within seconds of the warning, he leaned back in his chair and said clearly enough for the court reporter to record, this whole thing is a joke, a complete joke. Let's be absolutely clear about what just occurred. A defendant in a federal trial openly ridiculed a sitting judge on the record immediately after receiving a direct judicial warning. These were not the words of someone asking for mercy. They were the words of someone deliberately testing the limits of authority in that room. Judge Engoron had those limits, and he enforced them. According to court transcripts, the judge issued not one, not two, but three escalating warnings in the span of just 4 minutes. The first followed Trump's initial verbal interruption. The second came after Trump audibly scoffed and muttered, "Kangaroo court," while the prosecution was speaking. The third came after Trump rose from his seat. "Mr. Trump, sit down immediately," the judge ordered. "To sit down now."